Coming up on 5 Minute News. Overpass collapse on Mexico City Metro kills at least 24. Taliban will likely curtail Afghan women's rights, says report. And America's new normal, a degree hotter than 2 decades ago. It's Wednesday, May 5. I'm Anthony Davis. The death toll from the collapse of an overpass on the Mexico City Metro rose to 24 on Tuesday as crews untangled train carriages from the steel and concrete wreckage that fell onto a roadway. Monday night's accident was one of the deadliest in the history of the subway, and questions quickly arose about the structural integrity of the mass transit system among the world's busiest. Another 27 people remained hospitalized of the more than 70 injured when the support beams collapsed at about 10:30 p.m. as a train passed along the elevated section, said Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum. On Tuesday, a crane carefully lowered a train car containing 4 bodies to the ground. Of the 24 killed, 21 died at the scene, while the others died at hospitals. Only 5 have been identified so far. Children were among the fatalities. On Tuesday afternoon, Carlos Miramar waited under a tent on metal chairs with 2 other relatives to receive the body of his uncle. The 25-year-old student had been awake since the beginning of an exasperating odyssey the previous night that took them to 7 hospitals and multiple prosecutors' offices in search of his uncle. Now they had found the 38-year-old Carlos Pineda, a man he described as a soccer fan and a buoyant personality. Pineda is survived by his wife, 2 children aged 7 and 13, and his mother. "I am tired and unable to sleep," Miramar said. "He didn't deserve this end. He was a good father, a good husband and good son." Initial analysis pointed to a presumed structural failure, Sheinbaum said, promising a thorough and independent inquiry. She added that a Norwegian firm had been hired to investigate. US intelligence agencies are warning that any gains in women's rights in Afghanistan made in the last 2 decades will be at risk after US troops withdraw later this year. An unclassified report released on Tuesday by the Director of National Intelligence says the Taliban remains broadly consistent in its restrictive approach to women's rights and would roll back much of the past 2 decades' progress if the group regained national power. It's the latest US warning of the consequences of the Afghan withdrawal now underway, 2 decades after an American-led coalition toppled the Taliban. President Joe Biden has set a September deadline for US forces to withdraw. While Biden and his top officials have stressed that they will not end their engagement with Afghanistan or advocacy for human rights, the US has also openly warned of gains for the Taliban, which has been locked in an insurgency with coalition and Afghan forces and already controls swathes throughout the country. During the Taliban's rule in the 1990s, women were largely confined to their homes, and girls had no access to education. Despite protestations from the US and Europe, the Taliban brutally enforced its extreme version of Islamic Sharia law with little consequence. It was only after the US-led invasion toppled the group that had hosted Osama bin Laden and his al-Qaeda network that democratic governance and respect for human rights in Afghanistan became a Western priority. 2/3 of Afghanistan's population is 25 years old or younger, with no memory of Taliban rule. While Afghanistan remains one of the world's worst countries for women, particularly in rural areas where little has changed in generations, Afghan women now serve in parliament, go to school, and run businesses. But there are persistent fears that as the US has negotiated with the Taliban on an exit from Afghanistan, women will be stripped of rights or once again be forced to wear the burqa, the all-encompassing veils that became a symbol of Taliban rule. America's new normal temperature is a degree hotter than it was just 2 decades ago. Scientists have long talked about climate change, hotter temperatures, changes in rain and snowfall, and more extreme weather being the new normal. Data released on Tuesday by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration puts hard figures on the cliché. The new United States normal is not just hotter, but wetter in the eastern and central parts of the nation, and considerably drier in the west than just a decade earlier. Meteorologists calculate climate normals based on 30 years of data to limit the random swings of daily weather. It's a standard set by the World Meteorological Organization. Every 10 years, NOAA updates normal for the country as a whole, states and cities, by year, month and season. For the entire nation, the yearly normal temperature is now 53.3 degrees Fahrenheit, based on weather station data from 1991 to 2020, nearly half a degree warmer than a decade ago. Charlottesville, Virginia, saw the biggest jump in normal temperature among 739 major weather stations. New normals are warmer because the burning of fossil fuels is making the last decade a much hotter time period for much of the globe than decades before. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen Podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.